Why hello, what's up? This is Hard Mode, a series where I play a game on its hardest difficulty or undertake challenge runs and then commentate and evaluate the experience. Let's go. This episode we will be going through DUSK, a game in the boomer shooter genre, a niche FPS subsection that has been making a resurgence in the mainstream lately, usually defined by more of a focus on level design and gameplay and less on story, which is pretty much there just as a bonus most of the time. Retro graphics are also a staple. I have played through this once before on DUSKMARE though, at the second hardest setting and thoroughly enjoyed my experience. Difficulty wise I felt it was fine, though I think it was actually just a bit too easy at points for my taste. Most of the bosses were especially underwhelming as they really only do one move, maybe two at best, except for one of them who was actually fun. This time around I will be playing through on DUSKMARE, which if you are unaware is a one-hit kill from any projectile, as well as making said projectiles faster, so needless to say we are in for quite a ride. It is an interesting way of designing the hardest difficulty of a game in the way it only really caters to the most hardcore of your audience. I have mixed feelings about this and I have seen some complaints raised about it before, and I do tend to agree that there really should be a difficulty between DUSKMARE and DUSKMARE that will really grab you by the balls but not just outright kill you for a single mistake. Note that I will also be playing on Intruder Mode, which kicks the difficulty up another notch by making you start each level with only your basic melee weapons, so nothing really carries over from stage to stage except for health and armor, which doesn't really make a difference anyways since basically anything one-shots me here. I feel like the game's levels are designed around this anyways with its weapon drops, and it suits the theme of the series quite well. Well, without further ado, let's just get into it. Kill the intruder. As you can see, the game really doesn't give you any introduction whatsoever and just throws you right into the action with no delay. I felt kind of rusty this first level as I haven't played the game in quite some time, so it takes me a bit to get comfortable with the controls again, which really isn't that long since the game controls fantastically. Movement overall is really smooth and especially strafe jumping feels much more satisfying in this game than any other like it I've played. You pick up speed really fast and you can pretty much zoom around the map like it's nobody's business. One thing about me is I really like to look around for secrets and corners and loot everything, but I quickly realized there's basically no point in doing that on this given difficulty as the most common item drops you are going to come across are health and morale being your armor. These are pretty much useless as most anything kills me. Ammo drops are still definitely going to be useful though. And here you can see exactly how easy it is for me to die. A split-second mistake and I'm dead, sent back to my last save point. Which brings me to something that I feel makes this challenge much more bearable, which is the extremely lenient autosave/load mechanic. You can save the game at any point you like, something that I, on my first time playing through this, actually somehow managed to completely miss. I, for whatever reason, had the notion of, oh, this is how the games of old were, right? You die and you go all the way back to the start. And I played through the entire game without auto-saving a single time on any level. I still don't know where my brain cells were located at the time, but they were obviously not in my vicinity, as even the loading screens will tell you to save and load games. This made for kind of a challenge run on its own, as any time I died, I had to do the old level over again. There were so many times I died at the very end, only to be sent back to the very beginning. The entire first level is quite a breeze, but things pick up pace very quickly. The second level I almost immediately start having ammo problems, but the game basically doesn't even necessitate ammo, as you can just throw rocks and boxes at enemies if you feel like it. At a certain point, it just doesn't seem feasible to fight through every enemy on the map, so I don't. The really cool thing about DUSK is you don't have to kill every enemy. You actually don't have to kill any enemy to complete the level. Every stage is fully completable without killing anyone at all, in fact. This can of course be extremely difficult, but it is doable. Also, since I do have experience playing on these levels and can, although vaguely, remember what to do or where to go, this strategy is much more viable for me. The entire first chapter has quite a distinct countryside cultist type of vibe to it, which I really dig. The setting and overall visual design of the game are wonderful in my opinion. I do have a fair bit of nostalgia for these old school graphic simulators, as I had an N64 as a kid and I was glued to that thing before I could take a shit by myself. It does intrigue me if these types of throwback graphics resonate with the youth of today at all, or whether they just kinda look old and bad. I could see it going either way really, but I'm a huge fan. Here we are introduced to the second strongest weapon in the game, the Iron Box, second only to a bar of soap, which is demonstrated later. This thing can one-shot any basic enemy, most tougher non-boss enemies, and even take a big chunk out of any boss's HP bar. It can apparently even one-shot nature, such is the power of this rectangle. Side note, I hate these rats. That's it. This level also includes the first boss encounter of the game. And as you can see, it is as underwhelming as I said it would be. You may be saying I cheesed it by giving him the Iron Box treatment, but trust me, it wouldn't have been any more exciting any other way. Almost all bosses in this game suffer from doing one simple pattern, which is walk, stand still and shoot, walk, stand still and shoot. This is all they do, bar two of them. Some do this more successfully than others, which is mostly dependent on the environment, but on the grand scale of things it's terribly boring and probably my biggest gripe with the game. One thing that I'm noticing as we move into level 3 is that Intruder Mode is much more intimidating on DUSKMARE, as the basic melee weapons are pretty much useless, so I am left to fend off enemies with nearby throwables until I find my first weapons. This makes some room for some creativity in approaching the beginning of the levels. This isn't too much of an issue however, as the game often provides the first weapon right away. Here comes my favorite weapon in the game, along with a clip where I have no idea how I survived. The double barrel shotgun feels hella satisfying to fire, but sadly it gets a bit disincentivized on this difficulty, due to you never really wanting to be close to any enemy, as the projectiles move so fast that many of them are outright undodgeable at a certain range, unless you're going really fast. I do find moments to squeeze it in though. Here you can see one of the power-ups available to the player in use. It just makes you shoot really fast, that's kinda it, but it's quite effective and very helpful in most situations. The rest of the level goes by pretty smoothly and I don't really die that much here, as I am slowly starting to get into my groove. There is a pretty big variety of levels in the game, but mostly they can be categorized into two types, a non-linear open plan map or a more classic type of room-to-room hallway shooter type of deal. This one here falls into the first category, and after jumping around the map for a while and just exploring it and seeing where to go and what to do, I decide again that it's kind of pointless trying to kill everyone here, so I turn this level into a showcase of a pacifist run. So here is me completing the level just by jumping a lot. Splice that together on autosave points, of course. I died a lot, far from a perfect run, but was fun to do. Only thing I wrote down for this level is this is too scary, I don't like it, and I tend to agree. It's a very claustrophobic map with little spooks and scares waiting around each corner, and when any little jump scare has the ability to also one-shot me, it makes it even more stressful. I find myself grateful that enemies make distinct constant noises when they have already been spawned in. It's something I took for granted during my first playthrough, but here it comes in handy and lets me pre-shoot corners or just know what I'm about to face and how I should handle it. Other than that, a fairly straightforward one and not too bad. Next up, I'm going to be dumb again and do the pacifist route. I don't know why I decided to do it again, but here we are and I have no one to blame but myself.
Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Freaking dude! Grandpa, wake.
I think my logic was something like, oh, it's another open level, but this one is so much worse than the last one, and I had no idea where to go since I barely remembered this level at all. I struggle quite a lot, but I am extremely hard-headed, and when I decide this is the way I'm gonna do it, this is the way I'm gonna do it. Oh, whoops, I completely forgot there was a boss fight here. But oh well, it sucks anyways. It's just two base enemies of the game and they're just kind of big. Then that's it. I've already come all this way with the pacifist thing, so I just take it all away and skip the bosses as well. I won't skip any other bosses though, that would be boring and evaluating them along with the game seems integral to the experience. These two were hella boring though, so nothing much missed here really. I noted something on this level that I was unsure about before. When I started I was under the impression that any damage would be certain death on this difficulty, but that's false. The only things that insta-kill you are direct attacks from enemies. That means explosive damage and environmental damage is actually quite safe, as you are usually going to have a huge health pool just from passively picking up health and morale and never using it. It's a nice touch and removes a bit of frustration from the overall experience. So, this is the point where we start getting the new military opponents that will be very prevalent in Chapter 2. I presume things are going to get a lot harder from this point onward. These guys are a complete pushover on any other difficulty as they deal very low damage and die super easily, but the projectiles they shoot are fast, multiple and can be hard to dodge, and there are usually a lot of these guys. So on DUSKMARE I presume they will be an absolute menace. And I was correct as I immediately start getting destroyed by these guys only a minute later when looking for an exit from the level. Alright, this is Ghost Town. This one is kind of a special level in my opinion. It's an open stage with a lot of different options and useful secrets. Exploration feels more rewarding on this map than most others, and it hits the mark aesthetically with its drab downtown visuals and slow menacing ambient soundtrack. It's also quite lengthy, and having played through the first time with no saves, I had to retry this one quite a lot, but I never really minded going through it again, and it's as fun going through it again. The difficulty in each section feels surprisingly fair on this one. It ends with a really decent showdown here as well, probably the hardest part of the level, but it feels fun with a good amount of cover to hide behind, so no death really felt that cheap here. Coming out of the teleporter, on the other hand, is quite rough as you immediately get ganged up on in a small room, but still somehow didn't get frustrated at all. I'm probably just biased here, to be honest.
Are you prepared for what's next?
Final boss of the chapter here, the experiments. Seeing as they are the finale for the chapter, you might be expecting something spectacular or grandiose, but really it's nothing new. It repeats the same pattern as any other boss of shoot, run, and you can just counter this with hide, shoot, hide, shoot. The boss arena even has a little alcove you can take cover in to basically hide from every attack unless you get very unlucky with boss positioning. I decided not to take any cover for the second one, but it doesn't make that much of a difference as the projectiles aren't too tough to dodge from distance.
This is only the beginning.
And with that, chapter 1 of 3 is complete. So far, it's actually not half as bad as I originally thought it was going to be. One hit kill on projectiles sounds a lot more menacing than it actually is when you can save at any point in the game. Also, as mentioned, having played through the maps before provides invaluable knowledge on specific things like some enemy placement and where keys and exits are located, even when I don't remember most of them clearly. So far, I'm having more fun with this than I thought I would. It's quite a nice challenge, and it actually feels somewhat fair considering the circumstances. Also, the game aesthetically is just a treat. The soundtrack is especially noteworthy. That may just be chapter 1 speaking though, as moving into chapter 2 we will be getting a lot of those military opponents, and I can already tell that's gonna suck. Well, let's try and see. Okay, already this is starting to feel more like a bullet hell game. Taking into account how every normal enemy at this point is the soldier, playing this slow and killing everyone feels like an impossibility. So speeding through will have to do. This feels so fucking chaotic compared to the last chapter already. Okay, so this spot here. I am going to spend longer stuck in this goddamn staircase hallway than I did on a few other entire levels. I have a very limited amount of ammo, and each bullet I miss will cause death by one of these soldiers. Alright, watch this. Can you tell what killed me? I'll show you.
Delete the rats.
After finally getting out of the staircase, the rest of the level is actually not too bad and everything goes pretty smoothly. Except for this. Yeah, that's the end level door. Next up is one of the few stages in the game that really leans into the horror aspect of Dusk. Half of me is a fan and half of me is shitting pants. There are no enemies whatsoever during the intro and barely any noise whatsoever, except for some spooky ambience. Soon enough you find a sign pointing you to the ruins, and on the wall opposite is... Of course, the logical progression of things is to go in there. I've always said that if I have a gun to shoot at things stalking me in the game, I'm fine, but if I don't, I can't even play it. Luckily, Dusk is strongly in the former category and is all about killing scary stuff. This part reminds me of something. I gotta say, trying a certain section for a while and finally getting that perfect run feels very satisfying. Next up, we're starting with 2 boxes right off the bat. Means it's gonna be a hard one. I'm kidding, but this is one of the more frustrating maps simply because it's just absolutely full of enemies stuffed into every crevice. And playing on Intruder Mode, I will never realistically have the ammo nor the patience to kill everything here. So I'm planning on skipping anything that I can skip. I get up here and I get stuck for a good while. First, I don't really remember where I gotta go, so I take a bit of a panicked look around with every projectile on the map flying at me at once. After a few deaths I finally see where to go, and of course that rooftop is also just stocked with 8 enemies just waiting to one-shot me. I finally get in successfully, only to find, surprisingly, even more enemies crammed into a tiny room with a turret at the end I cannot realistically pass without killing it. I try a good dozen or so more times to get in the door unsuccessfully. I guess that first one was just luck, so I just decided to kill the ones on the rooftop. Luckily, there's a mortar drop very close to my save point to help me do just that. I make a new, quicker save point with a mortar already in hand and get to work. Again, after about a dozen attempts, I finally clear the rooftop and get a save point in a semi-safe spot. The fun does not end here, however, since I'm not even halfway through the level. The difficulty has reached preposterous levels. The chainsaw guy just killed me with his stare. I take it real slow here as I don't quite remember what's coming up, but I don't really have that many bullets left. I decide to say fuck it and do a little bit of jumping to save ammo. At this point there's just non-stop bullets flying at me from every direction. I stand still for a split second and I'm dead. I get a save point here and just look at this entry to the next room. Absolutely ridiculous. After a while I finally get myself wedged between this machine here and get a new save point, after which I slowly try to kill whatever I can with my extremely limited ammo. The turrets at the top are especially rough for me as I have no real long-ranged weapons at this point, and the goat monsters keep getting to me eventually. I try a few different things until I decide to just jump to a door. This, for some unknown reason, takes me back to the start of the level. I figure this means there's a red door somewhere that I missed or something, so I just wander around the level for a good few minutes. Mind you, the level is absolutely filled with enemies that I haven't killed. I eventually remember that I gotta get in the machine to progress the level, but I don't remember how. I know there's a shaft at the top here, but not quite sure as to how I'm supposed to open it. I just run around for a good while, somehow completely missing the red frame door below the machine. I do eventually find it. This level has overall by far the highest death count and time spent on it. I didn't really enjoy any of it either. There are just so many enemies spammed into every possible room and hallway that it just feels more frustrating than anything else. Also, the extra red door at the second to last room just confused the hell out of me. Like, why would it even be there? What is there to backtrack to? All it did was make me think I needed to be somewhere else. If there is any legitimate reason for that door being there, feel free to enlighten me. But overall, just a lot of frustration over this level, which is a rarity for me on this game.
Sacrifice.
So, this level starts the rare trope of falling and breaking your flashlight, making you play in darkness until you find a new one. This is scary, I don't like it. This particular level doesn't overdo it though, as the map lights up real fast, and since I have the beginning here memorized due to having done it several times last playthrough because of my no saving antics, it's not bad. This one is, again, quite lengthy, but not nearly as bad with its amount of enemies. The climbing gear is also put into proper use for the first time. I find myself again being grateful that environmental damage does not kill me as I bump into this meat grinder 100 times. Not the biggest fan of this climbing mechanic as it feels a bit clunky, but nothing too bad, I guess. I love the speed of this game. The movement is just so satisfying. I remembered this level being much worse considering the length, but it was a breath of fresh air after the last one, to be honest. Not too many deaths here, maybe a dozen in total. Previous knowledge came in very handy. Moving on to the best stage in Chapter 2, owing mostly to its neat twist and level design, I will be showcasing shortly. I'm not quite sure what happens here. I somehow managed to aggro the soldiers behind this wall with the explosion, I think, and for some reason they get squished walking into the wall, I think? I don't know, it's weird. First introduction to the time control power-up. It slows time to stop and makes it only move when you are moving, effectively giving you infinite time to react to anything. It's kind of a weird one, and for some reason I tend to actually die more using it than not. I start to play the game like super hot with this thing on and it doesn't work. It is still very fun to use, however, just not very effective in my opinion. This is where the level starts to get a bit wacky, if you will. This would be the starting room, but the layout has been distorted into a whole different room with furniture on the ceilings and everything. This is the first, and by my knowledge, only time the game pulls this kind of trick, and I enjoy it thoroughly. I was quite surprised the first time around, and it really muddles your sense of direction. The general fuckery only gets worse as you continue. Next room you enter is an absolute amalgamation of architecture and machinery, giving off some serious MC Escher vibes. I love games that twist your perception of reality like this. Alright, time for another boss fight. The arena for this one looks spectacular with some really nice eerie ambient music and these creepy moans made by the boss herself. I thought it was going to be a challenge as I didn't have that many bullets left on me and it's really easy to fall off here. I even tossed 3 boxes into the room just in case, but well, see for yourself.
What have you done?
It's just another case of shoot, hide. Only difference for this one is that she shoots exploding projectiles instead of normal ones. Oh no, absolute pushover, as always. Coming up now is the Erebus Reactor, one I already know I'm not going to like. This game has a few of these very open levels with a lot of enemies, but this one is definitely the worst in my opinion. It's basically just one massive room you have to navigate to find one key after the next while enemies just keep spawning in. Again, I don't think killing everything is going to be feasible, so I attempt to skip through most of this whenever possible. As you can see, not off to a very good start. I'm not even sure where I'm going, to be honest. I'm just randomly jumping around, hoping to find the correct place. There's also a huge hole in the middle of the map, as if the whole thing wasn't rough enough. There's even fake outdoors that just have more enemies inside of them and a small, insignificant for me, health or morale drop. Eventually I did manage to force my way through it. I did end up having to find a bunch of them just to be able to navigate the level at all. I reached another boss room here, but as you can see, turns out everybody decided to follow me in here. This isn't all too bad, however, as this arena has extreme amounts of open space for me to just strafe jump around them and have them shoot each other. This boss fight ends up being the hardest one so far, even though there isn't much competition, to be honest.
Come on, kill me! Come on, kill me!
I did actually die here a few times, but by the end all it takes is just hiding behind a wall as usual. He's pretty much a glorified soldier enemy, just with a bit more bullets and health and personality.
Come here, kill me! Do it! Come on!
Still, best one so far. At least he had something going for him. I don't know what it is about this level, but it looks ugly. Probably all the yellow combined with the rust. Kind of looks like an old toilet, to be honest. Nothing really that spectacular on this entire stage except for the use of a madness crystal. I think this should be the first time that it's introduced. It is at least the first time I've found it. This item, when thrown, breaks and creates this green fog. Any enemy caught in it is inflected with madness and basically swaps sides, targeting anyone but you. Extremely useful in packed rooms. I also get introduced to this wonderful room here, kind of wishing I had saved the crystal for this part, but here we are. Not much for me to do here but strafe jump in a circle and pray I don't get hit. quick note on how I really enjoy how this enemy is designed. You can effectively track it just by using sound. Just think that's a neat concept. 75% of this level is quite underwhelming, even boring at parts when looking back on it. This raises a point for me that I will expand on at the end of this chapter coming up. The last quarter of this level here is cool narration and use of music, at least. There's a pretty neat vista here of this endless black abyss.
He drove them out and invited us in.
I walked around just looking at everything here, and for some reason I heard one of those invisible goat things making noise near one of the edges. So I thought I'd take a look, and I found something very interesting. Thought I'd try to jump down to it, and what do you know? I just discovered a skip. I'm sure this must be well known by speedrunners and such at this point, but I sure didn't know about it, and it was a really cool find. Of course, I had to take it at this point. Took me a couple of different landing spots, but I finally found a good one. Got into this really lucky tight spot here where I was safe. When I saw the teleporter up ahead, I remembered that there is a boss fight here. A little bit of an Easter egg here. Meet Toxicator's wife, Marge, I think. Range. Anyway, I know I said I wouldn't be skipping any more bosses, but since I kind of skipped the entire level and I am on Intruder Mode, I definitely do not have ammo to fight the upcoming fight, so I have to skip it. But again, I don't really feel bad about it, since it's just the first boss, 2 mama types, and then the real boss is hidden behind the fake door. I get out on the second run. Still, sorry for skipping them. I know, it's stupid of me. I just had to take the skip, you know. I just had to take the fucking skip. A more legitimate boss is up next anyways, the Guardian. He fires a bunch of grenades and has a pretty cool labyrinth for an arena, but otherwise he's nothing special whatsoever and ties to the same exact strat as any other boss so far.
Most impressive.
Another subpar boss fight, sadly. It's really cool visually though, I'll give him that. And with that, chapter 2 is complete. Next one, the Nameless City. But I said before that I do have some complaints I wanted to discuss here. I feel the game loses a bit of its identity in the second chapter. It becomes much more generic, fighting so many soldier type enemies. The first episode of the game is a lot more compelling for me, especially in its certain setting. Fighting cultists and monsters in the countryside is leagues more charming than fighting mostly soldiers in some compound or meat factory or whatever the hell it is. It has its moments with some cool architecture and stuff, but mostly, especially indoors, I feel it lacks a certain pull that the first chapter had, making playing through it kind of a bore, even with the increased tension of being one-shot by anything. Even when rewatching my playthrough, I just get sort of a morose vibe from it all. Don't get me wrong, it did have great moments, but great highlights don't make for a great show. The downtime has to be enjoyable as well. The difficulty definitely spiked, having me die many times in some levels, but it often left me a bit frustrated rather than accomplished after beating it. There were so many moments where levels just felt bloated with enemies in every room, and I was just getting killed left and right sometimes without any idea of what actually got me. Most of this complaint is rooted in the difficulty itself for sure, as the first time playing it I didn't feel as strongly about this as I do now. However, I did feel that it was the lesser one when compared to the other two. I'm not saying I hated it whatsoever, just that it stuck out to me in comparison to the first one. I do look forward to the third here, as I have almost exclusively good memories that I can think of, and I'm only hoping I won't be disappointed. The level already starts with a cool intro of descending into some health chapel. Here's where you get introduced to the sword. It's kind of a strange weapon in that it has silent takedowns from behind, which seems really out of place for this game. I can't think of any other scenario where you would use it except for this introduction to the item here. It can also do a charged strong attack when you have more than 100 health, which does a lot of damage, and can block to deflect projectiles when you have morale. Both of these prerequisites are almost always going to be available for me, since I usually either have full health and armor or I'm dead. There is really no other state of being for me. Ah yes, I love forcing friends to kill each other, then savagely stabbing the survivor. So, the block function turned out to be extremely useful. Who would have thought so in a setting where every projectile one-shots you? Apparently not me, because I forgot all about this thing somehow. New enemy, a legless dog battering ram. Lovely. Doesn't look like much, but they are quite fast when they line up. Very cool design. Okay, so this was the most fun I've had on this challenge for a while. I don't know if it's because of no soldiers, it's probably because of no soldiers, or just the fact that this map is pretty much made to be played with sword. A much more enjoyable environment definitely helps also. I feel it evens the playing field when I can deflect projectiles and one-shot most basic enemies like they can me. Crossbow barely gets any use from me, as there are usually other weapons better suited for most jobs, but when in the perfect setting it does its job really well. And another introduction to a new enemy here. I don't really like these things. They're pretty much floating cultists with more health, projectile and attack speed. I can't get a good read on their AI either, as they sometimes fly into really weird angles for no reason, so I have to be extra careful in any room they spawn in. So this was another great level, a few deaths here and there, but nothing too bad. Again, the environment just felt fresh. Fighting in that snowstorm had a really nice contrast to the usual hellscape. Just overall, very solid. Here's another banger of a level just by visual standard alone. This one really reminds me of old school shooters I used to play as a kid. In level design it's quite similar to Ghost Town, as in it's one sprawling space with rooms rather than a corridor-based environment, which I really enjoy. No weapons are readily available right off the bat, so you have to run around and explore a while with only the basic handguns and throwables available. The more you explore, the stronger you get, and quite a few weapons can be completely missed if you don't check corners, like the sword here.
Non-believer. Kill him.
I spot something special here while jumping. It's a bar of soap. Thought it would be a good stage to show you what it can do. As we jump down this well, there is a boss fight coming up here. It's kind of special as it's underwater. It can normally be dealt with quite easily by just deflecting its projectiles back at it with a sword, but here's an even easier way. So I was talking up the iron boxes at the beginning, but those have nothing on soap. Soap deals 1 billion damage on contact with enemies. There is one to be found in each level, and usually out in the open as well. I found quite a few before, but didn't want to completely cheese any encounters, but I really wanted to use it on boss since I never have before, and now I have, and it was as satisfying as I was hoping it would be. Next up we have another scary level, my favorite. This one features another new enemy. You can hear it right from the start of the level. It sounds like it's not having a good time back there. It's fast, quite tanky, scary, and spits 3 projectiles at you if it can't get close to melee you. The 3 projectiles spread quite a lot and are very fast, making them really hard to dodge reliably. They do, however, follow the typical boss fight moveset, which helps take cover during the delay they have before firing. It's definitely one of the stronger enemies, but most of all, it makes the worst noises. I'm really happy they're locking up the rats down here. It's good to see. And nothing much more of note to say about this one. It's just another solid level in a streak of solid levels. Again, really enjoyed the horror elements of it. Not too spectacular on the visual side, except for the fleshy parts of the map that stick out, but nothing really felt frustrating. There were a few parts where it got stuck for a few minutes, but nothing that felt too unfair for me. This one kicks off with a huge, sprawling open arena with 4 buttons to press. Each one of them summons more enemies and adds another element to the soundtrack, which is neat. I am really trying to fight all these guys, so I just jump through everything and click every button, after which I have to head into the church and destroy an altar. I somehow managed to survive this and take the last shots at it while outside, which summons a huge fucking tornado to rip apart the church, and I love it. Jumping down there is another huge amount of cultists. Going forward and jumping down more reveals even more. This is a stage that does actually feel quite spammy with its enemies, but at least it gives you a courtesy full refill of ammo to massacre them with. gigantic amount of enemies doesn't feel as daunting as episode 2 did, however, just for the lack of soldiers. The basic cultists are so slow and predictable that they barely feel like a threat. There's this really long hallway here, again filled with enemies that I don't really enjoy. There's no cover beside the entrance, and you have these flying cultists firing really fast projectiles at you constantly, as well as some normal ones at the way back, leaving you to do this awkward back and forth behind your only line of defense. It's not too bad with the Riveter, just a bit annoying. Overall, probably the weakest level in episode 3 for me, part of the visual feast of the tornado at the start. We're returning to a more industrial level here, which is a bit sad, but nothing too stacking attack speed power-ups can't fix. Also returning here is my favorite guy. They bring their rat friends along, of course. The return does suit thematically though, so I can't be too upset about it as I flush various massive items down this small toilet. The entire level is designed to be a slow, steady return all the way back to chapter 1, and as so, features every enemy you have encountered so far. Going through this door in particular feels very jarring. Seeing these chainsaw cheeseheads and weird witches again feels somehow like you're making reverse progress. It's a very interesting decision which I really enjoy. Gotta say it again, I love the music. The level ends in the woods, almost completing the loop back to the start. I just love this sensation of coming full circle. This level is quite special in a few different ways. One is that it's the only level that gives any hint of a backstory to the protagonist. Second is a design exclusive to this level. First, you can't fall to your death, which is taught to you by this plank breaking. Second are these things, which will change the center of gravity to wherever it's pointing. I love games that screw with your perception of reality like this. Jumping down these trees and into the house feels hella disorienting, but in a good way. Especially seeing as the game has an unlocked Y-axis, meaning you can do a full flip by just dragging the mouse down while mid-air. Navigating the level like this feels unique. Reminds me somewhat of Outer Wilds. Oh, and there's a new enemy here. Last one to be introduced. It's a very weird one. It's this floating bacteria-like ball that continuously fires skulls at you, but the projectiles seem to be sprayed in your general direction quite randomly, making them very inaccurate even at a moderate range. They can also be shot to push them away from you, which helps. They aren't difficult as much as annoying, with their endless spray of projectiles and beefiness. Not a huge fan of these ones either, to be honest. The already aft-used crossbow has a very niche ability which I haven't mentioned yet. It stops your fall and launches you up a little bit after firing it, coming in handy at this one specific location for me. I'm sure it has a lot more uses than I'm giving it credit for, just didn't turn out that way for me. Okay, fuck, I take it back, these things make the worst noise for sure. Here is where we encounter the only tidbit of protagonist lore in the game. As we enter this house, the thought, how can I be here, comes up, while sound effects of burning flames and screaming can be heard. Interacting with this picture of a woman and a child reads, "It hurts to remember. It hurts so much I take a nap in the midst of this Lovecraftian nightmare." Interacting with this picture of an apparent couple gives the same line. My interpretation of this is that his wife and kid died in a fire. Genius, I know. I'll be signing autographs out back. Jumping back over to this island, we are taken back into a very familiar lab setting, continuing the trend of revisiting environments. This level is one of my favorites just because of how different it feels. There's no real difficulty to it whatsoever, but I do enjoy these scenic stages every once in a while. With as above, so below, we are fast approaching the end. The entire level is a huge mashup of all the environments we have visited so far, again bringing with it every possible enemy. It's quite tough. I especially struggle with the house area here, owing mostly to my own lack of patience rather than any real obstacle. I've been getting more and more confident and cocky the more I play, and it shows when I rewatch this playthrough. Got a freaky little room here where everything is huge. Also, there's a bazillion enemies of all shapes and sizes stuffed in here. Like, I'm fairly certain this is every enemy in the game that they put into this room. I don't really have anywhere to run back to from here, except for this straight hallway, so avoiding projectiles is a bit difficult. The next area is only familiar to you if you paid a lot of attention at the start. We finished the loop completely, as these are the first couple of rooms that we started the game with. Just a bit emptier and for some reason green.
Kill the intruder.
And here we are, back at the start, as we climb back onto the same meat hooks we got off of from the get-go, completing the circle.
Show us that you are worthy.
The second to last level is one that I have been dreading since the start of this playthrough. It's just one big, huge, non-stop continuous fight in a wide open area with no cover whatsoever, which sounds like a nightmare, or DUSKMARE if you will. There's one way to play through this level though. As I said at the very start, every level can be played through into completion without killing a single enemy. Such is the case with this one. You can turn back, run to this light in the darkness, jump a few platforms and take the coward's way out, which just ends the level right then and there. So obviously I am taking this one. Psych, I ain't that much of a pussy. Well, I was right to be apprehensive of this one. Definitely was a tough one, but actually didn't take me as long as I was afraid it would. It took me about 30 minutes in total. There are 9 stages to this massive shit show that feature the following. Stage 1 is soldiers and flying cultists. Stage 2 is shotgun scarecrows and the battering ram dogs. Stage 3 is knife-wielding doctors and red elite cultists. Stage 4 is exclusively invisible goatmen. Stage 5 is exclusively the floating skull-spamming bacteriums. Stage 6 is blood-spitting goats plus fatty fireball soldiers, and then worst of all, Stage 7 is all rats. Stage 8 is normal cultists, chainsaw cheeseheads and the horror monsters. Stage 9 is the mama types along with the blue witches from the early levels and iron knights. This all then culminates with a boss encounter that I actually completely forgot about. and this time there were no walls to hide behind to engage my usual plan, so it was actually quite a tough one. The bosses were sadly just rehashes again, 2 experiments and 1 guardian, but still was more fun than the bosses usually are, just for the lack of walls to hide behind. Overall, again, I had more fun with this than I thought I was going to. It wasn't all that frustrating though, at times it did get to me a little bit. The jumping pads really helps kite attacks, and if you run around enough, the enemies are just going to start fighting amongst themselves since they hit each other a lot when trying to hit you. The chaos this creates makes the entire fight much more tolerable. Out of all the stages, I died the most on the shotgun scarecrows, as the shots they fire spread out enough to make them very unpredictable and hard to dodge. There is a gem of madness in a hidden spot on this map that I actually took with me in case this was actually impossible, but decided not to use it just to get the full experience, and I'm glad I did. Alright, time for the last level.
Excellent. Come to us.
We enter a serene landscape, pop 3 crystals into the portal, and head into an encounter with quite an interesting opponent.
At last. You finally arrived. You shall be my final test.
We finally meet our constant narrator, looking a little freaky, and you can instantly see that this boss is very unlike any other. He feels like fighting another player character, as he uses the same weapons and strafe jumps across the map just like you. A very interesting fight, and definitely the hardest one by far. I can't get close to him whatsoever, as it basically means immediate certain death if he chooses to fire any weapon but the mortar, leaving me only able to use long range weaponry. The hunting rifle is by far the best weapon for this fight on this difficulty. Basically, if I miss too many shots with it, I'm done for and might as well reload or save. Hitting him is no easy feat, as he strafe jumps across the room in record time. Eventually he does fall, however.
You can't betray me! My disciples!
And we move on.
He was worthy, you know, and he accomplished so much. But then, you came along. You who were stronger. You who were faster. You I like better. Who did you expect at the end of all of this? God? The devil, perhaps? No. It's just me.
And we come to the true last fight of the game. It's less of a fight and more of a puzzle. You can't damage the boss until he takes a couple of swings and cracks appear in the ceiling. You shoot at the cracks, he becomes vulnerable, you shoot at him, the ceiling's repaired, rinse and repeat. It's interesting in its own right and not a bad encounter at all, but just like any puzzle, it's way too easy once you figure out what to do, and figuring it out really shouldn't take any time at all. The presentation is quite good, but even when getting one shot, the entire fight is barely a challenge. The prelude boss here will give you a much harder time. That may be intentional, and the very last fight could have been left entirely as a spectacle and not much more, and that's completely fine as the last one was challenging enough.
Enough! You are indeed worthy. And so now, my power is yours. How does it feel? Horrible, isn't it? But wonderful, yes. Who you were before is insignificant. Who you are now is inconceivable. But here you shall remain till I have need of you again. For one must always reign beneath dusk.
And there we have it. The challenge has been completed. I'm gonna be completely honest, this wasn't nearly as tough as I initially thought it was going to be. Sure, it wasn't easy, but I was expecting to be going at this for at least 15 to 20 hours at minimum. But I ended up completing it in 8. At the same time, I also ended up having a lot more fun with it than I first expected, because the thought of getting one-shot by anything in a game like Dusk sounds like torture, but ended up being a lot more quote-unquote fair. When I first read the setting for this difficulty, the first thing that came to mind was that it was just a tack-on for the hardcore of hardcore, but now I see it's not really that bad at all. It probably stands as a testament to how truly well this game is structured. It's truly a wonderful experience to play through no matter the difficulty setting, really. Another thing I really enjoy is how well Intruder Mode is incorporated here, as starting with only melee weapons feels really natural with the way weapon pickups are placed and handled, really forcing you to switch up your weapons for most levels. It adds a very nice layer of challenge and variety. If you watched through the video in its entirety, you already know that I did have some qualms with the experience though. Most levels in episode 2 especially, I just did not like that much. It was definitely the hardest episode, but also the one I just overall disliked the most. The difficulty in it felt much more frustrating than it did on the other 2 episodes. Episode 3 I felt balanced difficulty and fairness in a much better way, even if some of its stages also felt a bit bloated with enemies. Something about the level design just didn't rub me the wrong way like it did on 2. I think a big part of my dislike may just be coming from the soldier enemies plus the mostly boring environments it took place in. Episode 1 was overall a very solid intro to the experience. The first few levels will obviously going to serve more as an introduction without a huge amount of challenge, but the other ones ramped it up decently. I want to shout out some of the better levels here, which are Ghost Town. Okay, and we have to talk about the bosses also. Most of them are incredibly simple and can be beaten with the same strategy, bar the last 2. This is a part I wish had more work put into it. The encounters were just disappointing across the board, again, par the last 2. Every single non-end boss just has the same exact pattern of, yeah, you know it, move, attack, move, attack. The only real variation came from the projectile that it fired, whether it be a normal one, spread one, explosive spread, etc. And also the environment in which the fight took place. The biggest problem with this is if there is a wall, any wall in the boss arena, the fight's just laughably easy, even when you get one shot by anything. I understand that boss fights are really not the main selling point of this game, but I can't help but feel disappointed each time I enter a fight only to see that it's basically the same boss with a different skin on it. And as I said before, it's probably my biggest gripe with the game overall. But now, looking back and judging the whole experience, it definitely still was an enjoyable one. I had fun, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, especially starting it and ending it. The middle part gets kind of muddy. I give it points for being an interesting take on the hardest difficulty selection available, and I have changed my mind about it. Going into it, it seemed like a very menacing, borderline impossible task just by reading the text, but It ended up just being a fun challenge. At least it did something different other than just boost up the health and damage numbers on everyone, as is usually the case. I much prefer this to that. At least DUSKMARE wasn't boring. Anyone looking for a fun challenge that won't eat up too much of your time, I would suggest playing through this difficulty yourself, but I would generally avoid it for your first playthrough, unless you're really craving saving and reloading dozens of times per level, maybe even hundreds, I don't know, or unless you're some gaming god or something, which you might very well be. Alright guys, thank you for watching all of this. I don't know how I kept you here for its entirety, but I do love you for it. Had a lot of fun making this, hope it was half as fun watching. I'm always open for constructive criticism, so if you feel like something sucked, be sure to let me know, but don't do it in a mean way or I will cry. Thanks, see ya, bye.